Guys, this is Cesar Cavazos and I belong for the P4C high school group. I will be initiating this presentation and then my colleagues will take over. Let's begin by asking, what is philosophy? This is a very difficult question to answer even for us philosophy majors. Philosophy is a broad discipline that covers nearly every discipline. It's not a job, it's not a profession, it's a lifestyle, it's an alienation to the current world, and it's a way of thinking. It's a concurrent state of mind, it's an active way of philosophizing. Philosophy does not create honorable citizens. In fact, it creates worse citizens. It makes citizens doubt their current society, their current system, their current norms, traditions, and dogmatic beliefs. It's difficult to explain what it is that you do as a philosophy major as compared to other undergraduate degrees such as engineering. If you say you're an engineer, people typically not ask what it is that you do because they would assume that you will go into an engineering profession. The same with mathematics. People assume that you will go into a profession that involves math or do something that involves math. The same with architecture, political science. They might assume that you're interested in politics or that you are pursuing maybe a graduate program such as law school. So what is P4C? Well, P4C, Philosophy for Children, is a movement to teach philosophy to lower education students. So K through 12 levels. It's also an attempt to implement philosophy as a classroom. It's an attempt to set a foundation to develop the ability of philosophizing. In my opinion, it's a movement that still needs organization, as we will talk about it throughout the video. It's a movement that still needs a specific framework to build upon the foundations that you're teaching students. So a framework that will build up upon the knowledge that you teach every grade level until they reach the maximum level. So our work, what was it that we did? In my case, I went to Valley View High School. My student group were high school seniors. The lesson that I was trying to teach them was if there was ever an ethical side of murder. And my aim was to reverse the typical results of the trolley problem and question them. So I went into the classroom and I asked, it was a political science class, I asked the students if there was ever a time where murder was ethical. And of course, most of them said, no, murder is not ethical. You shouldn't be killing nobody. Like, if you kill someone, it's unethical. You're already breaking that rule. Well, then I went ahead and brought up the trolley problem, the thought experiment that us philosophers love the most, and I gave them the scenario, the third scenario, where you push an obese guy over and to save 5 people's lives, and most people said, no, I wouldn't push a guy over. He was just watching the trains. He was doing nothing. Why should I push them? So it's the typical response you usually get. So what I did is I gave faces to these people. This was the obese guy. I gave him this face. And this was the 5 people they were going to save. I gave them these faces. And most people, of course, said that they would save the 5 people now instead because they seemed more vulnerable. And of course, that was my aim. That's what I wanted them to do, to get them talking about why. Then we started questioning, well, what if the old guy dies tomorrow? What if the high school kid turns out to be a school shooter and shoots out the school? What if the small girl grows up to be a serial killer? And so we started philosophizing about what option was better to choose. And people were very engaged. People were very interested. Then we moved ahead and we talked about a very trendy topic, self-driving cars. So we were talking a little bit about self-driving cars, how they work. And then I asked them a question. I asked them, if you had the ability to choose what type of self-driving car, which would you choose? Would you choose a self-driving car that always prioritizes your life, or would you choose a utilitarian car, a car that always focuses on saving the maximum number of people, even though it means sacrificing your life? And most people said that they would purchase a car that always prioritizes their own life, and we started talking about what this would mean. We talked about, well, what if everybody decides to buy the car that always prioritizes their own life? Wouldn't it get chaotic and instead of saving lives, kill more people at the end? We talked about several options, and we talked about what if we didn't have a choice? What if people were actually going to decide for us, the algorithm that would go into the car, and the car would decide who to save? Who should these people be? Who should decide who gets saved in these kinds of situations? So people were very engaged. I tried to convince them to be philosophy majors when they reached university level. Most of them were not interested because they had this assumption that philosophers grow up to be poor. But I tried to tell them otherwise. It didn't really work. This just means that there's a flawed system, that they are taught to believe that those who are not following a job that would lead to a direct profession will not get as rewarded as those who do. I will leave my colleagues to finish the other part of the presentation, and let's hear from them.
I'm going to be talking about what we did in IDEA mission for the students. First, we started off by splitting the classroom in half in order to help every single student as efficiently as possible with our exercise. We started off giving them the trolley problem experiment. We gave one side the variation with just the regular one person on one side of the tracks and 5 people on the other side of the tracks. For the other side, we gave the variation of the fat man on the bridge up top while there's 5 people on the tracks. We wanted to see how each side would respond to their respective problems, and what we found out was that they all had a utilitarian view when it came to their responses. Pretty much they all focused on saving the biggest number, what was the greater good for society, for all of them. And it seems strange that even though they knew what they were doing to the fat man on the other side, they still went ahead and did it because they felt that it had to help the community as a whole. Really interesting. They seemed really into how we were setting up the experiments at the beginning. They were talkative, especially the ones in the back. Usually the ones in the back never really talk much when it comes to having the regular classroom discussions. But when we were split up, they were really active. And once we finished with those 2 experiments, we brought them together to try to see how they all reacted as a whole. And during that part, for a good while, we had them engaged. And even through the section where we talked about the Island Royale. But at some point, you could see how when we were forming back to the regular classroom etiquette, they kind of lost it, or most of the part, they lost interest. The ones in the back specifically, and the ones that spoke Spanish as well. In all, it seems as though when we had them close quarters in 2 groups, it seemed like they enjoyed it more. That having them talk to one another is probably the best way we could have done it. And I would say it was pretty successful in the end because they seemed engaged and they seemed like they enjoyed talking about these problems. For the most part, there were still some downsides to it, like the ones that just didn't really care too much for it. But it was an interesting experience, and it seems that the way they acted looks like they were really engaged with it, like something I've never really seen before when I would go to high schools or middle schools or any of those schools for that matter. And we pretty much just gather the information that for next time we'll keep them split up, just to make it easier for us to talk to each one of them, to hopefully have everybody engaged rather than just most of them. But I would say it was pretty successful. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name is Jorge Caso, and I will be presenting on why I think philosophy for children, or P4C, is indispensable. I think it really leads to a bigger question of, is philosophy indispensable? And I think that, by assuming this question, or is P4C indispensable, I definitely think philosophy is indispensable. You can even go to defining what that word means: philosophy, the love of wisdom. And, the love of wisdom should be for everybody, no matter how old or how young. And I think that it's really important to show. And with these three topics, I feel like, or these three subheadings, I feel like we do attack why P4C is indispensable, why philosophy for children is indispensable, and that it improves critical thinking skills. I think it improves critical thinking skills because, well, first we have to define what do the words critical thinking mean. And so we go to Google, real quick search, and we get that critical thinking is the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. So that's basically what we do in every single philosophy course. We look at a lot of case studies, such as like the trolley problem and the wolves problem, like we did in class. And that really shows us how to think about a situation. And it really shows us what could be the right way or the wrong way. And it shows us who has thought about it and what way they would choose an answer, or what way we could do that's new that could give us a different answer, possibly. And they give us different ways to effectively push out these outcomes that we desire. And then P4C also creates citizens that are more aware. This, I think, inherently is true because philosophy, if taught to children, since it's being locked out as a university course, if children are aware of philosophy, they could be inclined to want to know more about a variety of things, such as, biology, religion. Religion's like a mixed bag, but like it really shows them how could they live their life, or how should they live their life as well, which is kind of why you get like a little mix from the second and the third one. It's kind of similar. The difference is really that one you can make your own, but we'll get to that. So in this second part, that citizens are more aware, when you have more access to public education through high school, so if a student is aware of philosophy then, and they understand, or they can, be at least shown philosophy, they're going to love it. Because when you're a kid, you want to know, well, what am I supposed to do? And what's great about philosophy is that they give you reasons why, which not really anyone can tell you, and I think that is so valuable in itself. And it creates like this curiosity about this, like, this kid's wondering like, well, why should I do that? You really get to understand like the what would Jesus do thing. Like, is that really the right thing to do? And those are great questions. Should I be doing that, or should I be doing something else? Should I be doing something that helps me in the long term, or should I be doing something that helps me in the short term? And they really help you answer these kinds of questions, and the value each of these opportunities have. And then develops meaning in your life. I feel that what's great about philosophy is that you don't have to be locked down to choosing just one particular person. If, like, let's say it's a moral ethicist or something, you don't have to choose one person. You could say like, hey, look, I like some things from him, I like some things from her, I like the way they interact or something, but during this particular situation, I am affected more than by this outcome than someone else is. So I would choose a different one, kind of like in the trolley problem. Like if you have, 5 strangers and the other one's your mom, personally for me, I'm sorry to those 5 people. I ain't gonna do it. I'm not gonna sacrifice my mom. Sorry, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like things like that. And I think it's great, because a lot of us like to think of ourselves like, utilitarianism. Oh, we love the best for everyone. But when you're put in these really tough situations, it's hard. It's hard. Do you have a duty to someone who's taking care of you for, me being like 23 years? That's tough. And to say no to your mom like that, that's tough. But I think that what's great is that everyone has their own answer, and that, children can develop this answer too. And they can grow and say, you know what, maybe times change, maybe they don't, and I think that that's great. And I love that. I feel that it makes children more curious, and it makes them learn more. And I will be passing off the next part of the presentation to my colleague then. All right, bye.
There is a hole in our experiences with teaching philosophy to children, and that hole is that we've been unable to teach any elementary students, which is unfortunate because that is the group used to cite that we shouldn't teach philosophy to children. It would have been interesting to see if that held any ground in an actual classroom, but unfortunately we weren't able to test it. We'd like to propose a new system to teach philosophy to children, in which they have a class titled, of course, philosophy, all throughout kindergarten to 12th grade, in which they are taught philosophy through the means of parables and thought problems. We've found this by far to be one of the most effective methods in teaching philosophy to children, but more importantly, one of the methods which allows them to bring themselves into the philosophy they are learning, and most crucially understand why they're learning it and why it may be important to understand the distinctions between different systems of thought. From our observations, they've been highly receptive to parables given, and we believe if implemented nationwide with a flexible system for philosophical learning, that there could be a great benefit to the awareness and critical thinking skills of future students.